Now, I want to tell you ultimately how this one man does all of this cutting. But before I do that, let's look at some photos of a cutting shop so you'll have some idea of what we're talking about when we look at it. All right. This particular shop, I want to look down at the bottom man first. This is a close-up of a cutter. You'll see this funnel up over his head, and this is full of wet sand. And as the sand runs down this little line onto the piece, and the wheel is, of course, behind the piece. He's looking through this bowl, watching the wheel attack the surface of the glass from the back side. Now let's move up to the top picture now. And I want to show you several things in this. This is a cutting shop at Fry. Many interesting things. Now up in here, you see this big rod. This thing runs the full length of the factory, and in front of each of these frames, and these items are called frames, they hold water, and you can see the little funnels up above each cutter, and you see in here, so each guy has this operation. But I want you to notice the sprockets that are on this big rod that runs through there that continues to move. Now this is powered by normally electricity after about 1888, and prior to that it was powered by steam. And this wheel never stops. Each man has this giant leather belt, and just as you know with a 10-speed bicycle, if you change the sprocket and you move down to a smaller sprocket, you're going to turn it a lot faster. And you see this one has 1, 2, 3, 4 levels that they can put this belt on, and it will move at a more rapid pace. And depending on whether they're polishing or are doing the roughing work, they adjust this belt. Now I also want you to notice we have a lot of cutting wheels. These are flat polishing wheels up here on the top. Down at the bottom we have some cutting wheels laying around. And then the most significant thing I want you to notice is back in the background, if the cameraman can get in here, we have lots of wheels all on the wall there hanging on nails, and this is just unbelievable, all of these wheels. Okay, now there's a reason for that. What I want you to do is try to follow along with me when I'm describing one man doing this operation. Okay? First of all, when an order comes in for an item, the foreman, with a tiny brush and red lead paint, paints the design on the outside of the blank, the basic outline of the heavy cutting. All right. This man who's sitting at the bench, now let's let the cameraman focus in while I'm talking a little bit on this one person here. And since this guy seems to be taking a break, let's focus in on this guy. He has wheels behind him. He looks like he's ready to go. He even has an apprentice standing there, and there's one apprentice stands behind each 5 cutters so that he can observe all the action all the time. So let's talk about this guy. The piece comes down from the foreman who has put the design on the piece. This man, let's assume he starts with a great big stone, or the great big steel or carborundum wheel, and he does the basic design on that piece. All right. When he has the major cuts done on that piece, he then releases a clutch right here, and it takes the tension off of this belt. Now this thing continues to whirl, but the belt stops moving because it's slack now. He picks up a wrench, takes a bolt off of the spindle, takes a washer off of there, removes the wheel, sets it on the floor, picks up another wheel that's slightly smaller, also steel or carborundum, puts it on the spindle, puts a washer on, puts the nut back on, picks the wrench up, tightens up the nut, then puts the belt back on, double checks up here that he's still in the right groove up here, releases the clutch, and he does the cutting required with this next smaller wheel. When he has finished that, then let's say there's some hobstars that need another wheel that is also steel or carborundum, And so he releases the clutch, he picks up the wrench, you know the whole routine. He goes back through this, puts that one back on, and starts again. All right. By this time, he is now ready for the stone wheels to start the polishing. And so he goes back through this. And he repeats this thing 10 or 12 times until he's down using the felt brushes that you see in the background to finally brighten it up. And it is a very, very tedious thing. Well, I mentioned to you earlier about American Yankee Ingenuity. And it wasn't very long before the Americans learned that if you give each guy in line a wheel of one size and you start with the big wheel at one end and they work your way down the line, you don't ever have to shut off the wheel. You'd never stop cutting. They found that 60% of the time the wheels weren't doing any work. The guys were busy changing wheels and tightening nuts and picking up wheels and stuff. So, overnight, virtually, once they got this established and found a line of guys who could do the various types of wheels, then that's what they did. Now, these guys became real proficient with that size wheel, whereas before they were a jack of all trades and could do it all, and perhaps that's a detriment. But when you think they increased production up to 10-fold overnight, you can imagine what that meant in the way of revenue to that company. And all of a sudden, they got to figure out a way to get more blanks, because if there's orders coming in, they're cranking the stuff out pretty fast.